welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiridoluale, the headlines. IAEA mission to occupied nuclear plant in Zaporizhzhia arrives in Ukraine. Pentagon admits likelihood of Ukrainian shelling near nuclear plant. Plus, Odessa mayor calls for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate, says compromises should be sought and confrontation avoided. We begin with updates on the International Atomic Energy Agency's trip to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The mission from the IAEA to the power plant in South Ukraine left Vienna yesterday, and according to local sources, has in fact arrived in Ukraine. The United Nations nuclear watchdog team, led by its chief, Rafael Grossi, was due in Ukraine to assess any damage from recent shelling near the plant, evaluate the conditions in which staff are working, and according to Mr. Grossi's Twitter page, to protect the safety and security of Ukraine and Europe's biggest nuclear facility. The Kremlin said the IAEA mission was, quote, necessary, and urged the international community to pressure Ukraine to reduce military tensions around the plant. A senior U.S. military official has admitted that Ukrainian forces may have struck the area around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, but insisted that this was only in response to Russian fire allegedly coming from the area. Earlier in the day, Russian authorities said a Ukrainian artillery shell damaged the roof of the building storing reactor fuel. The official said it had to explain how the United States was monitoring the situation around the nuclear power plant, which is Europe's largest. Russian forces established control over the nuclear power plant in early March of this year. However, National Guard and nuclear protection specialists have secured the site while the Ukrainian staff continue to operate in it. We are learning that Ukrainian forces have launched an attack at the Russian-occupied town of Nova Kakhovka, knocking out its electricity and water supply. According to the head of the civil military administration in the town, Vladimir Leontiev, he says the consequences of the strike will probably be terrible. After the city was left without electricity and water supply, authorities managed to outfit hospitals with generators, but he says that they will start delivering water this morning. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that the newly instituted Memorial Day was to remind the world about Ukrainian losses from the 2014 Battle of Ilyvarsk onwards. Speaking during his nightly address, Mr. Zelensky added that Ukrainian troops will chase the Russian army to the border, as his senior advisor confirmed Ukrainian troops had broken through Russian defenses. The senior advisor says Ukrainian troops mounting a counteroffensive had broken through Russian defenses in several sectors in the front line near the city of Kherson. Moscow acknowledged a new offensive had been launched, but said it had failed and the Ukrainians had suffered significant casualties.
This Memorial Day is set for the end of summer, August 29, to remind everyone of the tragic events of 2014 about Luhansk. That is war, which began with the occupation of our Crimea with attempt to seize Donbas, should end in that very place. In the liberated Crimea, in the liberated cities of Donbas, with our troops reaching the state border of Ukraine. We have always kept this goal in mind. We have never forgotten it. The armed forces of Ukraine, our intelligence, and our defense forces are doing their jobs. I'm sure you all understand what's going on, what we are fighting for, and what we're striving for. And our warriors do not need any announcement or information waves behind them. Ukraine is taking back its own.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's military says it has broken through Russia's first line of defense in the Kherson region. The reported push appears to form part of a long-awaited counteroffensive been launched by Kiev in an attempt to retake the country's south. It follows weeks of Ukrainian attacks aimed at cutting off Russian forces there from main supply routes. Russia's military claims that Ukrainian troops suffered heavy losses during an unsuccessful attacking attempt. The claims and counterclaims by both Ukraine and Russia have not been independently verified. Kherson became the first major Ukrainian city to fall into Russian hands after troops advanced into there from the Crimean Peninsula in the opening days of the war. Early yesterday, Ukraine's Kakova operational group in the south said that one regiment of Russian-backed forces had left its positions in the Kherson region, adding that Russian paratroopers providing the backup had fled the battlefield. And Russia's defense ministry says Ukraine's much-heralded counteroffensive in Kherson, quote, failed miserably, listing estimated losses suffered by Kiev during the operation. Ukrainian forces had attempted to attack in 3 directions on the orders of President Vladimir Zelensky, but made no gains. Kiev saw 26 tanks, 23 armored fighting vehicles, 9 more armored vehicles, and 2 Su-25 ground attack jets destroyed, while more than 560 troops were killed. The mayor of the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa, Gennady Trukhanov, believes the conflict with Russia should be resolved politically. In an interview with Italy's Corriere della Sera newspaper, he says Kiev and Moscow should cease the hostilities and return to the negotiating table. Although he supports the idea of Ukraine, quote, returning to its borders of 1991, including Donbass and Crimea, Mr. Trukhanov maintains that these disputes should be resolved at the negotiating table, not the battlefield. He argued that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky had made, quote, many mistakes while in office. But he criticized the government for concentrating too much power in Kiev at the expense of the region. Russia has shipped a battery of S-300 anti-aircraft missiles from Syria to a Russian port near Crimea in an attempt to bolster its air defenses in the war with Ukraine. ImageSat International captured pictures showing the presence of the S-300 anti-aircraft battery at Masyaf, Syria in April, and the empty site left behind on August the 25th after the hardware was shipped to the port of Tartus. Separate images showed the battery components on the dock at Tartus between the 12th and the 17th of August, and by August 20th they had gone, and ISI concluded they had been transferred to a Russian vessel, the Sparta II, which left Tartus for the Russian port of Novorossiysk. So let's speak about all these developments. Joining us is Dr. Michael Ihoma Ogu, Senior Lecturer, Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the Babcock University. He joins us virtually from Elisha Remo in Ogun State. Good morning to you, Dr. Ogu. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, good morning, Ladi. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's look at this, what we've been reporting. Obviously, I mean, the statement that what the differences are between Russia and Ukraine should be settled on the negotiating table and not in the battlefield. Some will say it's expected, but that's not happening. So beyond that, in terms of the battlefield, the reports we're getting is that Ukraine has launched a counter-offensive on Russia, and this had been weeks in coming. Russia says that counter-offensive has, in fact, failed. But regardless of which side is telling the truth, it does look as if the war is expanding, shall we say, because if Ukraine is now on counterattacks, there's going to be more casualties, there's going to be more problems, and the conflict is going to become more entangling, isn't it?
Oh, yes, definitely. You know, it's first of all worrisome that, I mean, the war has dragged on for about 6 months and 6-7 days about now, and there's really no significant end in sight yet, you know, and like you've said, the war appears to be expanding, you know. And one thing that is interesting is the fact that all of this fighting is going on in the Ukrainian territory. I mean, none of the Russian sovereign territory is experiencing any of the heat per se, you know, in real terms. So even the counterattack that is currently being launched by the Ukrainian authorities, you know, are launched in Russian-held territories in Ukrainian, you know, on Ukrainian soil. So it is just it just appears as if there's an asymmetric kind of dynamics here, where Ukraine is losing, and perhaps Russia, still of course, as we can still see, stands at the upper hand. But sadly, like you said, the war is expanding, and that will create a whole lot more issues with humanitarian concerns, civilian casualties, and all of that as the months progress. If we don't find a solution to it as soon as possible.
You started off by saying that that this conflict has dragged on, for 6 months, just over 6 months now. At the beginning, the Russians probably hoped it was going to be a quick one. The Ukrainians hoped that they would get the Russians out more equally quickly. But not, both sides have been proved wrong. 6 months later, this appears now to be a war of slow attrition. So that brings me to the other side of this, getting the two sides, if you like, back to the negotiating table, which is what the mayor of Odessa, which would for some come as a surprise that he's calling for negotiations. But do you see the possibility that negotiations are possible at this point?
Well, at this point, no. I don't see negotiations. I don't see the possibility of negotiations taking place at this point, because the tensions keep rising, right? And on the two sides, there isn't any likelihood of any kinds of willingness to negotiate. So at this point, I really don't see any of that happening. But eventually, if we have to bring an end to this conflict, there have to be negotiations, because of course, conflicts do not end on the battlefield. There has to be peace building, there has to be peacemaking and all of that. So negotiations have to take place. But they seem very unlikely at this point. And I am just hoping that the two leaders in question, Putin and Zelensky, would be willing to talk about these things, because all of the negotiations that we have seen happen in the past, I don't think there's anyone that has brought them face to face with one another to actually talk these issues out. So there seems to be a whole lot of politics involved in it. A whole lot of emotions. And yes, negotiations have to take place, but as things are now, it is very unlikely that they will happen anytime soon.
Speaking about the conflict expanding, let's look at some of the other players that are in the conflict, because it's very easy to assume that, okay, it's Russia and Ukraine that are fighting. But you and I both know that there are other people involved. Now, on the side of Ukraine, the reason why one of the major reasons why Ukraine is still in this fight is the support from the EU and the United States. And Russia has gotten, albeit perhaps not entirely military support, but a lot of its oil has been bought off by India and by China, providing it with necessary resources with which to continue the prosecution of this war. And then you have the likes of Turkey, which negotiated the grains deal, which is going on. Even as this fighting is going on, the grains are leaving Ukraine slowly but surely. Many people thought that that grain deal would be the basis on which to build some kind of confidence that you could then use to deal with other measures. Why do you think that didn't happen? Because the grain deal is now well over a month old, it's several weeks old.
Yeah, in international politics is a game. If I could describe it as that, it's a game where actors, are always, counting their losses and their gains. You win some, you lose some. All right. So yes, the grain deal, we would have expected that some kind of negotiation, some kind of peace processes would follow from the grain deal. But of course, we can also say that that was just an effort by Russia, to buy time and not look like the devil in this in this case. So yes, the grain deal has happened, but still, the cards on the table, and the two sides, especially Russia, is also playing a game, and in the game they are not trying to look like the worst counterparts, in the two sides now that are in conflict. But they they also have interests. They also have goals and aspirations and objectives that they intend to gain from this conflict. And so they have to win some, they have to do some. And maybe the Green Deal was something they had to give out, just to ensure that they retain a positive image, as much as possible in this conflict. But of course, that is all that it has been. And I hope that they don't change their mind along the line and stop the Greens from leaving Ukraine, because that will also be a whole lot of have a whole lot of consequences for people who need these Greens to survive.
Let's look at the other side issue, if you want to call it a side issue, which is that as a result of this conflict, so many of the countries that had been reliant on others for some of the products that their people consume outside or inclusive of energy have looked in the direction of Africa. Russia has looked in the direction of Africa. The EU has looked in the direction of Africa. The US has looked in the direction of Africa. And, of course, China has also looked in the direction of Africa, albeit for a multiplicity of reasons. But it does not seem as if that move has gained traction on the African continent, either because, the African countries are not acting with one voice or because they don't know what they should ask for in return. How is that possible, given the fact that these African countries know what they have, know that these other countries that are wooing them need these products, and yet don't seem to exercise leverage?
Well, the African issue is a multifaceted issue, and yes, where we think that African leaders will rise to the occasion, many times we see them not doing so, and it would. I mean, one would have expected that African leaders will cash in on this experience, to assert some kind of relevance in the international system, but we're not seeing so much of that happening now. We're not seeing the big actors, on the African continent. We're not seeing them asserting as much influence as they will assert in terms of negotiating, with these various powers that you have mentioned, that are looking to them for some kind of succor, and so it is a whole lot when we come to talking about Africa and its role in the international system, its leadership, its politics. That is just a whole lot of issues, which, I mean, we can continue debating from now, for as long as possible.
Turkey has played, some would say, an unusual role in all of this, and one wonders why others have not stepped to the plate. Turkey is not, one would say, the person that everybody will expect to go to in the first instance, but it has played a key role in all of this. Why do you think that is so, and that others have not been able to play that kind of role?
Sorry, could you take that question again?
What I said was that Turkey has played a key role in all of this, the grain deal, the attempted negotiations, truce talks, and all of that. But it doesn't seem as if other countries have been able to step up to the plate the way Turkey has been. What do you think singles out Turkey for this role, and why has it been difficult for others to join it to create a critical mass in this direction?
Well, to kind of mediate in conflicts like this, there has to be, I mean, the mediator has to be somebody who is neutral, number one, and of course, who the two sides are comfortable with. All right. So I think that one thing that has stood Turkey out, is the fact that the Turkish president, seems to be in the good book of both Zelensky and Putin, and it is easier for the two parties to speak. I mean, to listen, perhaps, to speak with the Turkish president. Perhaps that is one thing that has stood him out. And of course, Putin is a very difficult, individual, if you allow me to use that word to describe him. And so it might not be very easy for several other people to get along with him as the Turkish president has been able to do. So I think that particularly, and of course it's not just Turkey. I think that at some point Israel also tried, but something that has singled out Turkey perhaps could be the relationship that he has with both Zelensky and Putin, and the position that he has put himself in all of this conflict. Not necessarily supporting or or opposing any part, but playing a largely neutral role in the entire conflict. I think that has given him an edge to be able to bring these two parties together and broker the deals that we're seeing that are going on at the moment.
Indeed, we'll keep a close eye on all of this. Dr. Michael Ihoma Ogu, thank you for your time this morning, and thanks for your perspective as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
Still to come on the program, France's Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne asks companies in the country to drop energy sobriety plan, while Germany and Hungary cry out for more Russian gas. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is at its lowest level since 1984, and that's according to recently published figures from the Department of Energy. While President Joe Biden has relied on emptying the U.S. reserves to bring down gas prices, his administration has no plans to replenish stocks until after next year. The U.S. emptied 18 million barrels of crude oil from the reserve in August, leaving the current inventory standing at 450 million barrels. The White House authorized the sale of 20 million barrels in late July on top of the 125 million barrels already sold off in the first 6 months of the year. Gas prices have soared under President Biden, with Republicans blaming the president's green energy policies and a crackdown on domestic oil production. The price of gasoline rose from an average of $2.28 per gallon in December 2020 to $3.40 a year later, with markets reeling from the conflict in Ukraine and Mr. Biden embargoing Russian oil imports. The average gallon cost a record $5 this June. And German Economy Minister Robert Habeck says the country faces the bitter reality that Russia will not restore gas supplies to the country ahead of the planned stoppage by state energy giant Gazprom of exports to Europe via the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Russia will halt natural gas supplies to Europe for 3 days at the end of the month for unscheduled maintenance to the Nord Stream pipeline, piling pressure on the region as it seeks to refuel ahead of winter. Russia has currently only been supplying 20% of the usual capacity of the Nord Stream 1 link from Russia to Germany. And in a bid to conserve energy, France's Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne says each company in the country should draw up its own energy sobriety plan next month amid concerns about power shortages and spiraling prices as the war in Ukraine grinds on. The government is urging companies to save power through dimming lights, closing external doors when running air conditioning units or heating systems, and switching off illuminated advertising hoardings at night, amongst other means. French consumers have been relatively shielded from soaring power and gas prices so far, thanks to the government-imposed caps that run until the end of the year. Ms. Borne says the government must set an example and that she's called on each ministry to provide by September a plan to reduce energy consumption by 10% in the next 2 years. She adds that corporate energy-saving plans will be reviewed in October and that the country should unfortunately prepare for the risk of energy rationing. Let's talk to Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, who is Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and the United Nations in Geneva. Your Excellency, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleased to be here.
Ambassador Ojiako, of course, is joining us from London. Ambassador, let me start off with that last point. There are some people who have suggested that perhaps this winter issue with energy supply and gas prices will do what diplomacy has not, which is to bring the warring parties to the table. Are you optimistic about that?
I wouldn't want to use the word optimistic, but reality, as we know, down some countries that are fighting war, and its fallout affects those who are not fighting it directly, and then maybe it will build up to the momentum where everybody says, now enough, it's enough. I think this conflict is ripe enough for a solution. Let's find a solution. The West is hurting. Of course, Ukraine is virtually being systematically destroyed. Russia itself is not having the best of times. So maybe with the United Nations coming in gradually, with Turkey playing the role it played in the grain matter, the world is beginning to see a thawing of the very strong positions these countries have taken. Hopefully, that could lead to further discussions. We know for sure that quiet, under-table discussions continue to go on. But when they burst in the open, then maybe we could begin to talk of optimism. At the moment, we just wish that it could happen.
It does appear, though, you're in London, and of course, amongst other European nations, the UK is about to get a new leader in about a week or so. It will get a new prime minister. There are other countries where the leadership also may be up for grabs, depending on what happens this winter, as you've just said, in terms of what happens with the people and whether or not the worst-case scenarios that have been predicted happen. Do you, on that side, think that beyond the two combatants in terms of Russia, that is the two direct combatants, Russia and Ukraine, are the other players in the conflict, the EU, in particular the United States that we've just reported on, and gas prices, and then on the other hand, players like China and India will also be drawn into this because their leaderships may also feel the pressure from their people to end this one way or the other so that life can return to normal. Many people point to the fact that we were just coming out of COVID-19 when this happened. So it's like a double whammy, and people have had it up to here.
Frankly, even let's take from the Russian perspective already. At the beginning of this war, many people predicted that if it lasted more than 1 month, Russia would be in great distress. At the moment, Russia seems to have borne the tide of the Western alliance supporting Ukraine. But Russia may have expected geostrategic actions from countries like China, like India, that so far have not happened. So it must be in some kind of pressure internally to begin to think of peace. Yes, the West, particularly the European Union, we can include Britain in that, even though they are not part of the EU anymore. With incoming leaderships in various countries, no new leader is going to be one to be saddled with problems of this magnitude, particularly winter in Europe. European winter is not something to be toyed or joked with. We've been talking about alternate sources of energy for the European Union. America has been tinkering with that. We've talked about Tunisia, Morocco, and Nigeria, even all of that. But we all know that gas transportation infrastructure is not something you build or construct in a few days or a few months or stuff like that. So the pressure is mounting both on Russia, on Ukraine, on the European Union, on the United States itself, where inflation is still growing in spite of Mr. Biden's best efforts. So the societal pressure in these countries will help, especially as winter approaches, that listen, it's time to stop all the saber rattling and begin to talk some kind of serious peace. Of course, you know that there is even a bigger danger lurking in Ukraine at the moment, and that will affect the whole world. That's the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, from where Russia is said to be firing missiles, and Russia is accusing Ukraine of attacking the areas around the nuclear plant. If any accident happens at this plant, Zaporizhia, it will make the previous one, Chernobyl, of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of April 1986, it will probably make it look like a child's play, because Zaporizhia is the largest single nuclear plant in all of Europe, and probably even across Asia and anywhere else you have nuclear plants. So it is time to talk peace, and that time is today. It's not even tomorrow. Yes.
Comment to this. I mean, you're a veteran diplomat who has served in that august body for quite a while, and you know its mechanisms and its workings. Many who are looking in from outside would say that the UN couldn't get into this because, as is usually the case, when a member of the Security Council is involved in a conflict, the UN mechanism, is challenged in that regard. But people still say that the UN could have played or could have done more than it is currently doing, as evidenced by what happened with the grain deal when it joined Turkey to put that together. But it seems as if once the grain deal was sorted, in the sense that the pressure on the world in terms of access to food supplies was reduced, the UN felt that it had done its job, and that others perhaps should do the heavier lifting of getting the two sides to the table. Is this a fair assessment?
I would think that the grain deal happened mostly because quite a number of countries, including in Africa, who were disposed to saying things from the Russian perspective, were becoming serious victims of the food shortage and the inflationary trend in grains and stuff that was already. So you could imagine the bilateral pressure from some of these close allies of Russia insisting that their peoples are suffering because of the blockade of exportation of grains from Turkey. So that and the action that Turkey took gave the United Nations an opening. It wasn't a strategic military issue to feed in the war. So the United Nations could get in and take cover under the pressure given by these affected countries, the leadership provided by President Erdogan of Turkey, and of course, the UN Secretary General himself had to head this whole thing and make it work. That is not the same thing when it comes to military action. So when a nuclear power like Russia decides that its vital national interest is involved in a specific matter, the United Nations can only act as strongly and as effectively as its member states give it the power and authority to do. The United Nations does not have a standing army of its own. It does not have any instruments of coercion on its own. It depends on the consensus of the Security Council, of which Russia is one, as you've noted, to take any actions. So we believe that developing conditions in Russia itself, in Ukraine, in both Eastern and Western Europe, and in the United States, of course, will compel them to begin to create windows for the United Nations to become the mediator, the negotiator, the peacemaker once again, which is what his role in global affairs is supposed to be. If they do not agree, if everybody's sitting on their high horse, frankly, I don't see anything much the United Nations could do. But in the case of the atomic thing I just mentioned, the United Nations has been able to persuade both Russia, Ukraine, and all the countries involved that the UN Atomic Watchdog, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency based in Vienna, Austria, should get in and begin to do certain things. First, to assess whatever damage has already been done to the place, to assess the functionality of safety and security systems, to evaluate the staff conditions in the plant at the moment, and probably to perform any processes or procedures that will guarantee and safeguard the activities going on in the place. Or probably at the end of the day, they will have to recommend that the reactor be shut down completely, which is not a very easy process either. No? But on the whole, I think the United Nations is doing what it can do. It cannot go beyond the authority that the member states give it to perform.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your perspective and for your time this morning. We'll keep an eye on this matter, and sometime from now, we will return to you for an update on the various emerging issues. Thank you this morning.
Indeed, if you have 1 minute, there is one point that is important to note here, and that
I have barely 1 minute, Your Excellency, just 1 minute.
Sure. That is the effect of any accident that happens at Zaporizhia. If the chances of an accident are now high, if it is not diffused, if those chances are not reduced immediately, the world may be in for a very dangerous winter ahead, which is one solid reason why talking peace has come as a necessity this time around. Yes.
Indeed, we all hope that that does not, in fact, happen, and that the IAEA mission is successful in ensuring that that is not the position for the rest of the world. Thank you very much, Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, not just from Ambassador to Switzerland and the United Nations in Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hungary will continue talks with Russia on additional gas supplies and expects to reach a deal with Gazprom to boost supplies further from next month. Its Foreign Minister Peter Szijjarto met his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, seeking 700 million cubic meters of gas on top of an existing long-term supply deal with Russia. Gazprom started to increase gas supplies to Hungary this month, adding to previously agreed deliveries via the Tok Stream pipeline. Hungary's reserves stored 3.25 billion cubic meters of gas as of August the 1st, and more than 51% of total storage capacity based on data from the National Energy Regulator. Under a deal signed last year before the start of the war in Ukraine, Hungary received 3.5 billion cubic meters of gas per year via Bulgaria and Serbia under its long-term deal with Russia, and a further 1 billion cubic meters via pipeline from Austria. And still to come on the program, National Ballet of Ukraine performs benefit show in Orlando, Florida for the first time since the Russian invasion. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. And as always, at this time, we talk to our business desk to look at things, and Ini joins me this morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Ini. Afghanistan and Moscow are negotiating a deal that would allow the country purchase gas and other energy products from Russia. Again, the Russians have headed off in a direction that most people were not thinking.
At all. So I think calling it Afghanistan, so people would just have an idea of the country. But when you say the Taliban officials,
right,
I think it drills the picture and makes it bolder in people's minds.
Right.
I mean, I don't think, of course, the world knows about, a little bit, I think, about, since we're not there, about what the Talibans are doing,
yeah,
what the U.S. has tried to do in Afghanistan and what the Talibans are doing, and what an idea of the life of the people living in Afghanistan at this time. Just to paint a little bit of that. So in June, the Taliban's banned online forex transactions. So because they have a lot of sanctions, I mean, the one with Russia is even small compared to theirs.
So what Afghanistan is under.
Exactly.
Yes.
So people who were living in Afghanistan had resorted to online transactions, of course, with $1 and all of that. In June, that was banned. Now, cryptocurrencies has been banned. They say it's not accepted in their religion and all of that. And of course, their currency, you can hardly, you understand, interact with other countries
yes,
with their currency.
Precisely because of all these
Because of
restrictions.
all of this and reactions and sentiments and all of that. And so what do people do? In fact, I think was it last month, a couple of months ago, they also, because of the ban on the foreign forex transaction, online transaction, some aids that were supposed to go to people there was cut off. Some people's money that, you know, they were supposed to get remittances and all of that, cut off. So now, this is the group of people that Russia will be trading with, and they're almost sealing that agreement where this is where the Russian oil that the world or the Western world is terming, well, I don't know what the term is, black oil, but, you know, cheap oil that China has been obviously patronizing.
As in India and a couple of others.
Yes, this is where to be going to. And if we have any idea, this might be a very strong tie, because the enemy to my enemy is my friend, kind of a thing, you know. So this might actually become a very deep tie. So when I saw the story, actually, I was worried, because if the world is trying to keep bring sanity and discourage war crimes and evil acts, and then you have a group like the Taliban finding expression with a country like Russia, this might actually empower, encourage, you know, such acts. And then we don't know where this will lead to, the trajectory it will bring to the story of the world. I think, for me, that's just one worrying thing that comes out of it.
Before we take a look at, now Finland is going to allow Russians apply for tourist visas.
Yes.
Only on one day.
Only on one day, yeah. So before now, the Finnish government used to have at least 10,000 visa applications from the Russians a day. 10,000, and they should allow it. And this is good for the Finnish economy, because they're coming with their money, they're occupying hotels, they're spending money, the catering and all of that. And then the argument ensued. It actually started last week. So some countries were like, oh, let's allow the Russians to go outside of the country. Then they would know exactly what's going on because of the mitigation of information that goes on in Russia. You know, Russia has been painted as a victim in all of this. You know, so when they go outside the country, then they'll know the true story, they'll know what's going on. But some people are saying, then that means that you're actually encouraging them. I mean, the same Russians that are leading the war in Ukraine, you're actually giving them freedom and they're enjoying themselves.
Have holiday and relax.
Exactly. So, you know, there was that argument on and on. So Finland, which reported then that they used to have about 10,000 visa applications in a day, now said they're going to cut it. So that's where this is coming from. And so they've come to, but I think some other countries have said, look, we don't care. Let them come. Let them come and spend the money. It's good.
It's good.
It's good.
It's their money.
It's
and
their money.
And we're fighting for democracy.
You
so
know?
Why shouldn't they be allowed to exercise their freedom?
You know what I'm saying.
Indeed. Ini, thank you so much. There'll be
for
other stories, of course, both from this conflict and from the wider business world, immediately after this on Business Morning and later on Business Incorporated. Thank you, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Take a quick look at the sports. Ukrainian qualifier Daria Shnigo has dedicated her opening match victory over two-time Grand Slam champion Simona Halep to the people of Ukraine. The 20-year-old produced the performance of her career to upset Halep 6-2, 0-6, 6-4 at the Louis Armstrong Stadium. She showed poise beyond her years to break Halep in the opening and third game, capitalizing on a mounting number of unforced errors from the Romanian. However, Sneaker's form completely fell apart in the second set as Halep stormed through 6 games in 24 minutes, but failed to maintain that momentum as she dropped her serve in her first and fifth games. Meanwhile, her compatriot Diana Ratsmetska wasn't so lucky, losing to the American Madison Keys in a hard-fought, big-hitting match 7-6, 6-3. Yastremska was quick to convert on her first breakpoint opportunity, taking a 3-1 lead in the first set. Although Keys broke back, the American was forced to fend off 3 set points when down 5-6, dismissing one of them with an ace. After a 70-minute first set, Keys' powerful serve won the day in the second set. We wrap up the program on a more cheery note even than that. The National Ballet of Ukraine performed in the United States for the first time since Russia's invasion in Orlando, Florida. The troupe performed sections from some of the world's most notable ballets while showcasing their Ukrainian culture. 31-year-old Mitka Sokorova was born in eastern Ukraine and has lived in Kiev for 15 years working as a dancer. He fled to Europe at the start of the war and now has joined the Ukrainian National Ballet in Japan. He said he's proud to use his talents to help his country.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a military. Yes, I can do what I can do. If I can help in this side of life, you know, it's really good for me.
The battle for nationhood and sovereignty is very strong. That's our program this morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ladi Akeredoluale. There's an update at 5 o'clock on The World Today. The show is back tomorrow at 9. You have yourselves a pleasant day ahead.